Olá, bem-vindo ao canal Mormonismo sem Censura. Meu nome é Marcelo Ribeiro e estamos aqui mais uma vez tratando da história, doutrina e práticas da Igreja de Jesus Cristo dos Santos dos Últimos Dias. Hoje eu tenho aqui conosco um convidado muitíssimo especial, um dos maiores ex-mormons que existe no mundo, um canal com milhares de seguidores, há muitos anos tratando desses assuntos e, na verdade, uma pessoa de grande influência para mim e para Sandra. O canal dele, o Mormon Stories Podcast, foi uma grande ajuda quando a gente estava no momento mais difícil de processar toda a nossa crise de fé, trazendo informação, trazendo experts em várias áreas sobre a história da igreja, sobre Bíblia, sobre o livro de Mormon, Joseph Smith, e também, o mais importante, que toca mais fundo no coração da Sandra, que são as histórias de vida, né? Falando sobre o que as pessoas passaram dentro da igreja, os problemas todos que existem, os conflitos entre família e as doutrinas da igreja e tudo mais. Enfim, trazendo aqui para vocês hoje um convidado super especial, sem mais delongas, gostaria de apresentar para vocês John Dehlin, do canal Mormon Stories Podcast.
Hi everyone, hola, que bien. ¿Cómo se dice hola en português?
Oi.
Oi, hello.
Oi, tudo bem?
I'm very happy to be here on Mormonismo sem Censura. Is that right?
Isso,
Hello,
perfeito.
welcome everyone.
Que joia.
Muito bem, muito bem. Is that right?
Então, daqui para frente a entrevista vai ser em inglês e a gente vai providenciar a tradução, tá legal? So it's been something in the works for a long time. John and I have been in touch once in a while over phone and texting and everything about collaborating, and I'm really happy that he ended up coming here to our city, in Idaho Falls, to an event, the Thrive event, that we can talk about a little bit here in a second. And everything worked out perfectly. The stars aligned, and here we are. Right, so I know some of you in Brazil don't necessarily know John because his podcast obviously is in English, but I would like to introduce you a little bit to him, like a little bit of an interview here. So John, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, right? Where are you from, where you were born and raised, and how you were you born in the church or joined the church later? Talk us a little bit about your origin.
Okay, well first I just have to say how excited I am to be here and how special it is to see this community and the work that you guys have done. This is very important work. It was really fun for me to review the comments that people made about how this YouTube channel and this podcast has helped so many Brazilians and Portuguese speakers. And for a long time, I've felt bad that Mormon Stories was only available in English. And it's so exciting to see how this work in Portuguese over the past 7 years or so has grown. And so I'm just very happy to be here. I have to say that. And I'm very moved by your dedication, both of you, to this incredible work. So thank you. And I'm honored to be here. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, we are honored to have you. Então, pessoal, eu queria fazer uma pequena pausa aqui na entrevista do John Dehlin, porque ele se referiu a alguns comentários que ele leu de pessoas agradecendo sobre o canal, né? E eu gostaria então de ler alguns desses comentários aqui para vocês. Foi um pedido que eu fiz no grupo no Facebook, e várias pessoas atenderam esse pedido e mandaram seus depoimentos para que eu pudesse mostrar para o John, e foram vários depoimentos, né? Eu vou ler só alguns deles aqui para não tomar tempo demais, tá bom? Então, seguinte, e as pessoas que eu disser o nome aqui é porque elas me autorizaram a fazê-lo, tá? Então, o Birajara de Paula falou o seguinte: o que eu posso dizer sobre o que o Marcelo e seus vídeos no YouTube trouxeram para a minha vida foi consolo e luz. Fiquei completamente decepcionado e magoado com tudo que descobri que a igreja estava escondendo da história da igreja. Então, ao ouvir que eu não era o único que estava passando por isso, foi um grande alívio e trouxe consolo e me ajudou a curar feridas. Uma outra espectadora falou o seguinte: quando decidi deixar a igreja, os primeiros dias e semanas foram muito difíceis. E tendo um sistema de apoio onde as pessoas compartilhavam as mesmas dores, os mesmos medos, desejos e solidão, encontrei no canal e no grupo Mormonismo Sem Censura do Facebook um apoio fundamental, porque percebi que milhares passavam por esse divórcio com a igreja, e eu não estava sozinha. Com certeza, minha querida, você não está só. A Su Casado falou o seguinte: este é o melhor e mais informativo canal do YouTube sobre ex-mormons em português. Sempre recomendo aos meus amigos que estão em crise de fé, pois o Marcelo e a Sandra estão empenhados em transmitir informações com respeito e eu amo isso. A Silvia Silva, que tem um podcast no Spotify chamado Eu e o Mormonismo, falou o seguinte: adoro esse canal, foi muito importante para mim e ainda será para muitos. Imagine uma pessoa acordando, desorientada, sem entender realmente onde estava ou para onde está indo, sentindo-se profundamente sozinha e dolorosamente louca. Essa fui eu, e tenho certeza que muitos se sentem e vão se sentir assim. Esse canal é muito importante. É um suporte, uma luz, uma fonte confiável, porque vocês são pessoas de confiança. Obrigado, Silvia, pela confiança que você deposita na gente. A gente continua aqui fazendo o melhor que pudermos. Vamos ler mais esses comentários nos vídeos futuros, mas por hora, gostaria de voltar à entrevista com John Dehlin.
Yeah. So, what was the question?
So, yeah, where were you born?
Oh, okay. So,
where did you grow up?
So it's fun. I was born in Idaho, which is where we are.
There you go.
I was born in Boise, but my family moved to Texas when I was 2 years old. So I lived most of my life in Dallas and Houston before my mission, mostly Houston. So I grew up in Katy, Texas, which is a suburb of Houston,
Nice.
and very, very devout Mormon. And my ancestors are all Mormon pioneers. So my family goes back to the very beginning of the church.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And then you serve your mission.
Served a mission in Guatemala, so I speak bad Spanish,
Mhm.
which is even worse Portuguese. But yeah, I spent almost 2 years in Guatemala and loved it.
Okay, John. And so you went to Guatemala, and at one moment, I know it was during the mission, was it after the mission that you started questioning things about the church. How did that go?
Yeah, so before my mission, I had questions, but I never really doubted or, it didn't reach the level of being like a problem. But on my mission president was so eager to be the highest baptizing mission in the world, to have the most baptisms, that we were baptizing, many, many, many children, 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, with no parents, with no missionary discussions, and they would baptize 10 at a time. And our mission would have like 700, 800 baptisms a month, but people would immediately fall inactive. And so this is an issue that I felt wasn't right. So I went to my mission president and said, President Romney, what we're doing here isn't right. And he got mad at me and told me that I shouldn't question my leaders. And that was the first time in my life I had experienced sort of abuse in a church context.
Mhm.
And that was the first real crack, as we like to say,
Right.
in my testimony. So yeah, it was, but I loved my mission. I loved the Guatemalan people,
Mhm.
and it was a real privilege to be there. But yeah, the way that sometimes we exploit people as missionaries to gain converts and to take people out of their traditions and bring them into ours, I don't think is always a good thing. Sometimes it might be a good thing for some people, but I don't think it's always a good thing.
Right. I had a lot of good experiences in the church too, but I've seen the church do a lot of good in people's lives, especially in lower income people in slums in Brazil. That's my background, of course, and I bet it.
Favelas?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you had those questions. You asked your mission president. He said, "Shut up, don't question.
Mhm.
Just floor ahead, keep going." Then you come back from a mission, from your mission. Did you ever had a chance to talk with higher ups in the church, like apostles or anyone like
Yeah.
that? Do they have any different answers, I guess, than your bishop would have?
Yeah. So when I got home, I went to BYU and I found a professor that helped me write a letter to Dallin H. Oaks, who's currently the first president in the first presidency. And I told him what I had experienced on my mission. And he actually called me on the phone and told me that he, you know, felt that what I experienced on my mission was unfortunate and that he would do his best to make sure the church no longer used sort of business sales techniques to bring in converts. So I was really grateful that he reached out at the time. But what made me sad was to see that the church really didn't do a lot of changes, and that today, in Africa, they're sort of doing the same thing in Africa that they did in Guatemala in the 80s, and that they did in Japan in the 70s, and England in the 60s. There's this long tradition of unethical baptisms that the church just can't seem to let go.
Yeah, so that kind of practice, like here is the baseball baptist, right? In Guatemala was too. In Brazil is the soccer baptism.
No, in Guatemala it was soccer.
It was
In
soccer?
Guatemala it was soccer. Yeah,
There
for
you
sure.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'd go to a soccer field, play soccer with a lot of kids. They'd be all hot and dusty, and they'd say, "Let's go back to the chapel to cool off." And then they baptized 10 at a time
Right.
with no discussions. Parents didn't know. They'd never been to church. That's how they did it
Right.
in my mission.
That's why you didn't like the practice, because it was soccer. If it was football. Just kidding.
Basketball.
Right, basketball.
Should have been basketball.
True. And by the way,
I'm tall.
by the way, we are sitting here because if you were standing, you would be talking to me and John's chest.
How do you say dos metros in
Dois
Portuguese?
metros.
Dois metros.
Yeah, exactly. All right, John. So you had that conversation with an apostle, you talked to your mission president, you had questions that weren't being answered. A lot of people at that point, either they just bury the doubts in the sand, push it down, right? Or they leave the church, right? But you didn't. You started a podcast. What took you from, okay, I have questions about the church, to I think this needs to be publicized. People need to know. What took you from point A to B there?
Well, actually, I kind of did bury those doubts. So this exchange with Elder Oaks happened in 1992 or 1993, and it left me with doubts. But I went ahead and finished my degree at BYU. I found my wife Margie. We married in the temple, and we started having children. And we stayed faithful for another, 8 or 9 years, where I just had these doubts in the back of my mind, but I was as faithful as anyone could be. But around 2000, 2001, I was called at first to teach Sunday school to teenagers, kind of like Doctrine and Covenants and church history to teenagers. And they really liked me as their teacher. So they asked the bishop to make me a seminary teacher. So in 2001, I was called as a seminary teacher for the church, and they have seminary in Brazil, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I started studying church history so I could teach the Doctrine and Covenants and be the best seminary teacher I could be. And that's when I started reading books about the real history that I'd never been taught as a member. So by 2001, right around 9/11, is when I lost my testimony, or when I realized that the church wasn't what I thought it was.
Right.
That's when I learned about Joseph Smith's polygamy. That's when I learned about the Book of Abraham. That's when I learned about all the problems in the church.
Right.
Yeah, and so that happened in 2001, but I still loved the church, and I still felt it helped people, and I didn't know how else to raise my children. So we stayed in for another 13 years, but that's when I said, I've got to do something. I can't just know there's a problem and stay silent. So I was depressed for a couple of years between 2001 and 2005. I was working for Microsoft. I left my job at Microsoft, moved to Utah, and then in 2005 I started the podcast. And it was just to help people like me, like you, work through the problems, because in 2005 there really wasn't anyone to talk to.
Right.
Everyone felt alone. Everybody felt broken. Everybody felt like they couldn't talk to anyone. And I just said, no, we've got to make it so that everybody can know the truth, and that people don't feel alone, and people can have others to talk to.
Right.
So that's why I started Mormon Stories.
Awesome. So yeah, so that's one of the worst aspects, right, of a high demand religion or any organization that suppresses doubts and issues, right? So heavily, and where people need to keep that appearance of being good, being okay, because then you're alone. You don't have any. You always think you're the only one with that problem, right? And you don't have anyone to talk. That's one of the reasons why we started our channel as well, right? Inspired by your channel. Even the background is the same.
It's not real brick.
Right? Oh no, it just broke the
Como se dice en
Tijolos.
tijolos? Okay.
Yeah. So John, you have a podcast. I have a podcast. Since we started, lots of other podcasts popped up in the US. When we started, there was one other. Now there are at least half a dozen podcasts going on.
In Portuguese?
In Portuguese, yes.
Excellent.
Yes. So what's your opinion about the importance, the service, right, that these podcasts have to offer?
Yeah. I don't know what the saying is in Portuguese, but informed consent is something that I really believe in. That if someone wants to believe in a religion, that's great. I'm very supportive of that. But people should know what they're giving their lives to, giving their money to. If you're to buy a car and the car was broken down, you deserve to know that before you pay for it. And if a religion has problems, if a religion has historical problems, or if it hurts people, people deserve to know. So one of the main things is people in Brazil, people in Latin America, everyone deserves to know what they're a member of. And unfortunately, when missionaries convert people to Mormonism, they don't tell them all the facts about the history and about the ways the church can hurt people. So podcasts like this, they inform people, they give them a chance to know what they're being a member of, what they're going to dedicate their life to. And also, any organization can hurt people. Governments, education, schools, podcasts, they all can hurt people. So people sometimes need help to know how to prevent from being harmed. And so podcasts like this can help warn parents, young adults, everyone. It can help them guard against dangers and manage their lives in a way to allow minimal harm to happen to them or their loved ones. So that's why I think this is important.
Yeah. And it's funny, sometimes people will comment on videos and things we have on Facebook, and it's like, oh, I know all these things and I love the church. I was like, great.
That's great.
If you know all those things, I hope that's helping you avoid all the harm and just enjoy the good.
Absolutely.
Right?
But the biggest problem has been so much of the content has been only English speaking for people in the United States, and that's not good. So it's been so fun to see efforts in Brazil, efforts in South America and Mexico, and now in the United Kingdom and over in Europe starting to emerge. And we need just so much more effort. I need to do a better job of promoting podcasts like this, YouTube channels like this, so that all the members in Brazil and in Portugal and wherever else they speak Portuguese can know about this amazing channel.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. And so podcasts have come and gone in the US. We start seeing that in Brazil as well. Some people start after we did and already not doing anymore. So in your view, what makes podcasts last? What makes them endure and be successful?
Yeah.
And what the ones that are not, right? What did they miss?
Yeah, like the biggest secret of podcasting, people ask me all the time, what's the most important secret to podcasting? And my answer is never quitting, because it's so hard. Podcasts are hard. They take time, they take effort, they take emotional strength, because people will criticize you, you'll lose friends. There's all the preparation time that goes into it, all the equipment, all the costs. So the hardest thing is just not quitting. And so, I think one of the most important things I've learned for the first 5 years of Mormon Stories, I never received any money, really. I just did it as a volunteer. But over time, it became so hard, so challenging, took so much time that I realized unless I started receiving some money, some financial compensation for my work, I couldn't justify taking the time away from my wife, taking the time away from my kids, taking the time away from my career. So I was really afraid to ask people for money. But the truth is, Mormon Stories has lasted 19 years, and has grown and succeeded so well in English because people stepped up and financially supported me. And in 2010, I made a deal with my listeners. After 5 years, started in 2005, 2010, I said, listeners, if you will donate $10 a month, and if 1,000 of you or 100 of you will donate $10 a month, I will keep doing this podcast for as long as there are donations. And guess what? Listeners and viewers who value this content, either for themselves or for others, they stepped up, they donated, and we've been going strong from 2010 until now. That's another 14 years, and we've just been growing exponentially. And we've actually helped millions of people learn about Mormonism and become healthier in or out of the church. And so I just want to make a plea that if you like what what Marcelo and Sandra what they do, please support them financially. How do people donate if they want to donate?
It's going to show up in your screen right now. The QR codes that you see on the screen, you can donate through those. They're somewhere here on the screen. And there are also links in the description of the video that you can click there and take to your to send a Pix or a Venmo or a PayPal. There are different ways.
It's not that Marcel or Sandra are trying to get rich off of this. It's just that, like, you need it. It's almost psychological more than anything. It just makes you feel like people appreciate what you're doing, and it just makes you feel encouraged. And in some ways, people pay for what they value. And so what you do is you send a message to Marcelo and Sandra that their time is appreciated. So for you, what's $10 a month, right? But for them, if 100 people pay $10 a month, then they feel like, wow, people really like this. People are valuing it. They're helping cover the costs, and I can justify the time. So if you want podcasts like Mormonismo, Censura, if you want channels like this to succeed, you need to step up and financially support them. And don't just do it for you. Do it for the hundreds of thousands of Portuguese speakers who are Mormon or who are looking into Mormonism so that they can have the benefits of this amazing information.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Couldn't be a better endorsement right there.
Yeah. Thank you, Marcelo. Thank you, Sandra. This is amazing. And thank you for the community and for all you all do, because it's so beautiful that we're all supporting each other in this important cause.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And I want to invite you to come for a long version interview in the future at some point. And this was just a little appetizer. Right? And Sandra here too.
And I want to have these guys on Mormon Stories. So will you guys come be on Mormon Stories?
Oh, now you're on the record now.
I'm on the record. Within the next couple months, you guys, I want you to come to Salt Lake, and I'd love to interview you. Like David Archuleta's mom. Did you guys see that?
I did.
Let's do a Brazilian version, a Portuguese version, and an English version.
Okay.
So I'll interview them in English, and then maybe you guys can interview each other in Portuguese.
Yeah.
And that could be a Portuguese version of your story that will get pushed out to, 500,000 people.
Yeah.
Awesome.
John, thank you so much. Thank you.
Make sure you're in the camera.
So I think I am.
All right.
Thanks,
All right, pessoal. Muito obrigado. Tudo de bom para vocês e até a próxima.
Tchau.
Sem censura, mas com respeito.
Com respeito. Obrigada.
Tchau.
Se você gostou desse vídeo, lembre-se de curti-lo, se inscrever no canal e deixar seu comentário abaixo. Para mais vídeos como este, acesse um dos links que aparece na sua tela agora ou visite o canal Mormonismo Sem Censura.